Welcome into Flag for Discussion, episode 20 for Monday, August 25th. My name is Farbod Merkazi. He is Jace Hatfield. Games happened yesterday. Week 0 happened yesterday. We got a lot to talk about. Today, obviously, we're going to start with Iowa State, Kansas State, and then we're going to talk about some of the rest of the games that happened yesterday. The SEC is finally going to 9 conference games. We're going to chat about that. And then we're going to recap some of our picks. Jason and I had a really good week in terms of our gambling picks. So we have a lot to discuss. This is obviously, as I mentioned, this is episode 20 of Flag for Discussion. This is also episode 1 of our 2 shows per week during the season cycles. We're going to have a recap show on Sunday or Monday like this one, and then we're going to come up with a show Wednesday or Thursday every week that are previewing the next week's games. So thanks for tuning in. We're going to have a lot of fun with this new schedule. Jace, week 0 happened yesterday. You had a really busy day yesterday. How are we feeling?
We're feeling good. It was fantastic to watch the game. I was at a close friend's wedding yesterday, so we had a group of guys watching the first 3 quarters of the Iowa State, Kansas State Farmageddon monsoon. And then fourth quarter was on beautiful wedding, very lovely. Timing didn't work out in a way. We didn't get to watch the fourth quarter. But there was some score checking here and there, maybe, potentially. Scout, I hope you're not listening. Beautiful wedding. So it was great, though. It was a ton of fun to have football, and it was awesome, like, after, the ceremony at the bar, before the reception, just talking about games and to actually have football to break down and looking at the TV and seeing game highlights and people breaking down film. It was it felt good to be back. And we were in South Bend, and in that area, just had that crisp, like, it was like 70 degrees, had the crisp kind of fall air going. It was moving day for Notre Dame students, too. So you really could feel – it felt like football. We were by the stadium too, so you could see big touchdown Jesus out there. It was so right. It was fantastic.
That's awesome. I before we get into anything, obviously make sure you're following us on YouTube at Flag for Discussion, on Twitter at Flag F4Discussion, and on TikTok at Flag the number 4 in Discussion. One of these days, Jace, I promise I'll get our handles down. They're just all different. So I always forget which one the 4 is in, but I'm trying to get them down. And then obviously, if you're not on YouTube, you want to still consume our podcast, we're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, anywhere you get your podcasts, we're all there. Jace, I think I interrupted you.
No, we hit the character limit on TikTok. We were like, it misses the end. So I remember that was a poor foresight on my part there. So I think that's what I kind of screwed you over on that one. But the other question I was going to have is, how did you end up watching the Iowa State Kansas State game? Because we had been texting a little bit, but I know we were both busy.
Oh my gosh, yesterday was. You had a wedding to go to. My fiance had a bridal shower to go to. So there's a lot of weddings that are happening in our lives, and my dog's coming up to me as we speak. So it was a pretty busy day, but I tried to make sure I blocked out the morning. So I sat down on my couch, maybe had a little PS5 on the side, and I was playing some games, watching the game. It just felt like football. I will say, I thought there was going to be game day or a big noon kickoff yesterday. I knew there was not going to be a big noon kickoff, but I thought there would be game day because there was last year. And that's just an oversight by me because I didn't see it. And I probably should have known that, but at the same time, all good. Look, there's a there's a pretty big piece of news that happened this past week that any other week it would lead our show, Jace, but I think we need to set some sort of ground rules as we enter our first season as a podcast. If there's a major college football game happening, we're going to talk about that first. So let's talk about Iowa State, Kansas State. Iowa State beats Kansas State 24-21 in Dublin. Matt Campbell gets his 100th career win. Massive game, pretty massive ramifications for the Big 12 entirely. Obviously, last year, Georgia Tech and Florida State played, so that was a big ACC game until we found out what Florida State ended up being, so it didn't really matter for them losing that game. But then, like in the past, Notre Dame's beaten Navy. So some of the games in Dublin or week 1 aren't massive conference games. This one was. This one is two Big 12 contenders who are trying to take the next step, each of them in their different ways, and it hasn't lived up to the hype some years, or they're still climbing, knocking at the door, trying to knock the door down. Iowa State won yesterday, Jace. I want to get your take on Iowa State. Let's talk about Kansas State in a few. Obviously, they're going to overlap, but let's talk about the winner. What did you see there?
Yeah,
Why did they win?
Yeah, I thought the Cyclones looked a little sloppy, but I think week 0 monsoon, so I'm trying not to let that like bog down my take. But what they did well was I thought in high leverage situations, they good play calls, got the ball into playmakers' hands, and they executed. They were 3 for 3 on fourth downs offensively. Kansas State was only 1 for 4, meaning 3 for 4 basically from Iowa State's defense on fourth downs on the other side. So if you, in those 7 key plays, you won 6 of them. That is in close games, especially conference games. That's going to be how you win those games, right? Like both teams were turning it over. Like I said, it was pouring rain. You're both playing in those conditions, so it's not like one team is worse off because of the other on that. The pitch at the beginning I think was a little bit ugly, but I thought they adjusted well. I thought like first and goal, or was it second and goal from the 1, you're throwing a pitch. I think they adjusted well. They kind of took that out of the playbook. I also thought they were really creative. They like came into that heavy set a couple times, at least twice I can remember watching, and then they would spread it out empty, and then they would run Rocco Becht into a very favorable matchup at the line of scrimmage, and he got a couple short yardage first downs that way. So I thought Matt Campbell did a really good job of putting Rocco Becht in positions to make plays. His passing touchdown to Brent, I'm going to butcher that last name, the beautiful fade in the corner of the end zone.
Yeah,
that was a gorgeous throw. They gave Rocco a one-on-one, gave him a chance to make a play, and he did. I thought he stepped up when he needed to, and I think that was the difference for Iowa State. They didn't look great at times. I thought the offensive line play was subpar, but I thought Rocco Becht fought hard. He stayed in it, only completed 50% of his passes, but he didn't seem to get down on himself, or he didn't quit throwing the ball. And when they needed him to make plays, he did, and that was the difference between them and Kansas State, I think.
I think at the beginning of the game, I mean, I texted this to you too. It felt like nobody wanted to win the game. I mean, when what's it called? Iowa State had the ball first. They went 3-and-out or early punt, and they punted to Kansas State. Dylan Edwards drops it. First of all, that's the only touch we saw of Dylan Edwards all game, because he went out and went to the locker room, was ruled out for the rest of the game after that. But right at Iowa State, Kansas State, Dylan Edwards fumbles it, the punt, drops it. Then Iowa State recovers inside the 10. They fumble it a couple plays later. And obviously, we heard Chris Klieman at half complaining about the field conditions. I think that's just, we're never going to get a game with perfect field conditions unless you got a dome.
Yeah.
And you're kind of signing up for that risk, especially going to Ireland, where I've learned recently that it rains a lot there. So the field conditions weren't the best. I just choose not to use that as an excuse for anyone, but it was clearly hard for the quarterbacks to grip the ball. It was hard for players to gain their footing or traction on the pitch itself. So that on its own was one thing. Rocco Becht, I don't know. I think for me, like you said, side note, we got a new printer a week ago, so I printed out the box score just because I'm really excited to have a printer. So I'm looking down at the box score. Total yards, Kansas State 383, Iowa State 313. Passing yards, Kansas State 273, Iowa State 183. Rushing yards, Iowa State 130, Kansas State 110. Yards per play, Kansas State 6.7, Iowa State 4.2. So in those 4 categories, Kansas State had Iowa State beat. First downs, Iowa State 19. They were 3 of 14 on third down, but they were 3 for 3 on fourth. Kansas State was 5 of 13 on third down, 1 of 4 on fourth. So you're out right on the money. It's those crucial moments that Iowa State converted that Kansas State didn't. And or you can go back to Chris Klieman's call at the end, and where he goes for it on fourth down because he said it in the post-game press conference that he didn't think, with the way his guys were struggling to stop Iowa State, that was a – that was a drive he could afford to punt on. So I felt that no one wanted, either wanted to win that game. There was a lot of chaos at the beginning. Then all of a sudden, in the second half, the plays started being made. Carson Hansen came in and really toted the rock well for Iowa State. I felt that Iowa State's offensive line struggled in the first half, but they really, really were a difference maker in the second half. And I don't know if that was some sort of adjustment made by Matt Campbell and his coaching staff, or if it was just, hey, you're here now. Let's get the early game jitters out. It's a tie game. Let's go win this game. And they just buckled down and went for it. So Carson Hansen came in, finished 16 carries for 71 yards. Rocco Becht, like you said, 50% completion percentage, so it wasn't great, but and only 183 yards, but he made the plays when he had to. So Iowa State, don't get me wrong, when we're talking about this game, it wasn't like a 30-point game. Kansas State played well or just as well, or if you want to say they both played poorly, they played just as poorly as Iowa State. It was Iowa State just made a couple more plays, in my opinion. I mean, both sides had 2 fumbles, no interceptions. Iowa State had the ball for 7 minutes more of game time as well. Like they
controlled
the
time of possession. I thought they controlled time of possession well. And I think, like, you made a good point there. I thought they both were sloppy. I actually didn't think either team played winning football yesterday in the grand scheme of things. And part of it, like we've said, was the weather and the conditions. It's just hard to play football. Like, a lot of Rocco Becht's incompletions were probably passes that should have been caught. They would be caught, I think, in dry conditions. Hit a lot of receivers in the hands that didn't come up with completions. Also, just wet football. Like, there's a few he kind of sailed by like a foot, a couple inches even. And, that's something you probably expect week 0 in the rain, but I think he'll get that under control. I'm not worried about him moving forward at all with Iowa State. And actually, I think the running backs looked good. The wide receivers actually looked all right, in the tight ends, other than a few drops like because of the rain. The O-line play, I was nervous for at the beginning of the game when Rocco Becht got sacked a few times early. I thought that was going to be a huge problem. But to your point, and to the credit of the offensive line, they doubled down on themselves, and they played really well in the second half. They were able to run the ball. I think that was a huge part of their game plan. Rocco Becht started running it a little bit more too, and I thought that went well for them. The one thing I'm a little nervous about, though, is the 3 for 14 on third downs. That is brutal, and you got away with one. You had really good fourth down success, which is great, and you were stopping them on fourth down. But you can't bank on that every game. It's just those are things that, yes, you have good players, yes, you can scheme well, and you can take advantages in fourth down scenarios, things like that. But it will even out over the course of the season. 3 of 14 on third downs is really rough, and that's got to be something that they improve. I think they need to find some sort of playmaker in the passing game that they can get the ball to. He can make a man miss and get upfield, get a first down. I feel like yesterday, if they were third in anything beyond 4 or 5 and they couldn't just run it, I felt like they had to throw to the sticks, and they just didn't really have the guys getting separation. And with the conditions, they just couldn't make those completions downfield. So they had to throw short, and they couldn't get to the sticks. They're going to have to find some sort of consistent, maybe it's with the tight ends, or maybe the receivers just better footing when they get back to Iowa. Whatever it is, they need to find something on those third and mediums. Hey, who can we get the football to quickly, get them in space, make a man miss, and get upfield? I just felt like they lacked that yesterday.
Now, it's pretty important to note, and it's not making an excuse for either side. Week 0, you get the jitters. You get the nerves. So some of the early mistakes were because of that. It's also not only a travel game for both sides. They're also in Dublin. Like, they have to fly to another country to play that game. So it's all out of whack for a lot of people. Like to say the college football is the pros now, but you got to still understand these are 18, 19, 21, 22-year-old kids that you are expecting to make plays, and most of the time they still should and will. But they're at the beginning of the game, especially the first half, adjusting to the field conditions. It was just sloppy on both sides. And I think that was one of those moments where I think if I was a fan of either team, it would be, yeah, I know it's sloppy, but if we could just get it into field goal range. I know it was hard to kick field goal in those conditions as well, but just get points in, because we don't know how easy it's going to be to get points the rest of the game because of how sloppy everything's been. Just take advantage of your situations and opportunities. And I don't have their red zone stats in front of me, But we talked about it at the beginning of the game. It felt like both sides were in the red zone at least a few times each, and
Yeah.
not only didn't come away with a field goal, they didn't come away with a touchdown. They didn't come away with points.
Yeah. It was sloppy. The pitch was just Matt Campbell. That was honestly the only coaching staff, I should say. That was the only blip they had for me. Iowa State. I think after that, Iowa State outcoached Kansas State through and through. And I actually think I think the only edge I thought Iowa State really had in that game was Matt Campbell outcoaching Chris Kleiman, and that ended up being the difference. I thought Chris Kleiman outsmarted himself a few too many times. I thought Matt Campbell made really good calls in terms of game management, going for it. And yeah, outside that one pitch early in the game, kind of like, what are you doing? Look at the conditions, man. Look at the situation. Do we really need to be doing that? Outside of that, I thought, Iowa State kind of figured out. Kansas State, though, we'll get to them here in a minute. But I think, like, what the point you're about to make with getting in the red zone, Kansas State just did not capitalize. They had that one Avery Johnson kind of scamper in the red zone, and then outside of that, it was tough sledding for them. And part of that's Iowa State's defense too. They kind of had the bend don't break going, which a lot of good defenses do. Especially I think early in the season, you're still trying to figure out your guys, figure out rotations. That's kind of a defense you might have to play, and they did a good job. They didn't break in the red zone. They forced turnovers. Two big things to do if you're trying to win a week zero conference game, technically a Kansas State home game. Something interesting, I have a question for you on Far Boat. So right at the beginning of the game, right before the start, Taylor McGregor of ESPN was talking about how she had talked to Matt Campbell about his mentality coming into this season. So back in 2020, Iowa State went 9-3, won the Fiesta Bowl. That 9-3 because it was like I think they played 11 games and won the Fiesta Bowl. Yeah, that was the 4-2 Ducks or something like that. Anyway, so Iowa State was great that year. Very solid season, good, strong to the end. And he said that he let his foot off the gas, was what Taylor McGregor was saying. Matt Campbell said he let his foot off the gas, and he regrets that. And they slipped. I think they went like 7-6, and they won 4 games, and then 7 again. So they definitely took a step back as a program for not just that next season, but 2 more. They've gotten back to that point, kind of where they were in that 2020 season, and he said he's learned from that. He said he's not going to ever let that happen again. And I thought at first, I'm like, okay, I would think every coach would probably come into every season pretty on top of it. Honestly, I thought he coached a dang near perfect game outside of maybe 1 or 2 play calls that you could get nitpicky and question. Do you think that's evidence of he actually has learned his lesson? He came out because I thought he outcoached, and I thought his coaching was the difference in that game. I'm curious what you thought about his coaching and just his sentiment overall.
Look, there's a couple different avenues you can take this. Yeah, he outcoached Chris Kleiman yesterday, and neither of us think Chris Kleiman is a bad coach. That's just how good Matt Campbell coached that game. I think if you're talking about just Iowa State as a program, obviously 2020 was what? Brock Purdy, Breece Hall, that team was stacked. That team, how many times have we said it already on this show, Jace, where Iowa State, even though they are extremely respectable as a program now, before Matt Campbell, they struggled to win 4 games on a consistent basis. They struggled to win 5-6 games on a consistent basis. So Matt Campbell's not only grown that, but also they are a developmental program. And I can't necessarily fault them for going down after losing Brock Purdy, who just signed a $200+ million NFL contract, or losing Breece Hall, who, well, the Jets are the Jets, but he's a very talented running back. You lose certain, you try to recruit well, evaluate well, identify well. You bring them in, try to develop them to the best of your abilities. And most of these teams, like Iowa State, they look ahead. They're like, okay, 2024, 2025, that's our window with Rocco Becht. That's our window with our core. And last year, obviously, they want those 2 receivers that they lost going to the draft last year, but their window is now. And you could say, as a coach, maybe he did struggle a little bit. I forget what year it was. It might have been last, might have been 2 years ago. But do you remember after a loss, Matt Campbell was running back to the locker room with the team, and there were fans that were just in the area around them running back, and they started yelling at him. I was like, man, this guy was one of the top coaching candidates for all the head coach openings, and now he's like getting yelled at by his own fan base because he's trying to rebuild redevelop the next era of Iowa State. I think, yeah, you could. He probably feels that they let their foot off the gas a little bit, but at the same time, I think that's also the reality of the good Iowa State teams. They need a year or two of cooking, or a little year or two of marinating before they become really good. And
Yeah.
I think the last aspect, and sorry I'm rambling, is the coaching aspect of it. And you and I have talked about this off cam a bunch. Coaches don't get a lot of time to develop much anymore. We just mentioned at the beginning of the show that this was Matt Campbell's 100th career win. You don't think he's learned over those 100 games between Toledo and Iowa State what he should be doing, what he shouldn't be doing, the best ways to attack different situations, blah blah. That we keep talking about new head coaches. Dan Lanning gets this a lot. Of he makes a mistake, or Oregon misses on fourth down, and Dan Lanning gets a lot of hate for it. And I'm like, it might have been the wrong decision, might have been the right decision, but at the same time, Dan Lanning is in year 4 of as a head coach at one of the major programs in the country, so he's seen. Matt Campbell got to make a lot of his mistakes at Toledo and learn how to become a college football head coach at Toledo, and then take that to Iowa State, especially early on when he was really building that thing, and there wasn't a lot of attention outside of Iowa State circles. So he got to make a lot of those mistakes quietly. Guys like Dan Lanning don't, and that's just the nature of the beast that you sign up for if you're a Dan Lanning type. So I say all that to say is Iowa State has to expect some sort of down moments after their super seniors move on, because they're not as much of a reload team, and that coaches are naturally going to grow and develop as long as they're brilliant and as sharp and determined as a guy like Matt Campbell is.
Yeah, I agree. I thought it was a cool comment to hear at the beginning of the game, and then to see it play, like to genuinely see. Oh yeah, okay. Matt Campbell is. I thought every time they needed to go for fourth down, and they should have, they did, and they had a great play call. Every time it was like, maybe play it safe. Your defense is playing well. Punt this. They did. And then every time Kansas State came out with something, Kansas State kept throwing a big haymaker with a little bit of trickery, good plays. And I just thought Matt Campbell did a really good job keeping his team locked in. It looked like Kansas State arguably was the more talented team. I thought they had some of the better players that looked like in that game. Jace Brown looked really good. Avery Johnson looked really good at times as well. Dylan Edwards going down was tough, but I thought Matt Campbell, he just did a really good job. And like what you were saying at halftime, Iowa State, I was nervous for Iowa State at halftime, thinking, okay, I feel like Kansas State's going to run away at some point. Iowa State came out, looked like a whole different team in that second half. They looked way more physical. Defensively, they actually started to get into the backfield. I feel like in the first half, there was just not really much of that going on. They protected Rocco Becht a lot better in the second half, opened up a couple of running lanes. So I thought they just looked better. And I have to imagine part of that is good coaching adjustments, good speech, sort of like figuring out what we're going to do, good game planning, good in-game adjustment with Matt Campbell and his staff. So I thought it was a cool comment, and it was cool to actually kind of feel that in the first game I watched of Iowa State this year.
It was, you could tell that both teams just wanted to get to halftime to talk it out, because I think Chris Kleiman had enough time to call timeout and at least try to pull a rabbit out of his hat at the end of the half. But they both let it get to halftime, tied 7-7. And they both came out with not with their hair on fire, but they both came out looking better in the second half. Kansas State went. Here's the main difference in the game. Kansas State had 2 quarters; they didn't score a point. Iowa State had 1. Kansas State was worse on fourth down specifically. Iowa State was much better. Iowa State held the ball more. They had more control. They both punted the same amount. Iowa State ran about 17 more plays as well. So it was a 3-point game. It was close, and I think Kansas State had more. Well, we can switch over to Kansas State now. They had more probability to break a big play open, but I mean, I'm looking at the box score right now, and this is Avery Johnson went 21 of 30, 273 yards, 2 touchdowns. And I think if you and I weren't watching this game when we saw that, we'd be like, he had a good game. Those 2 touchdowns were pretty much off of busted plays, and the guy had a free run to the end zone. And obviously, Avery still has to make the play. The guy still has to catch the ball. Like, things have to go right for that to happen. Um, but at the same time, I thought, ironically, looking at Rocco back to a 50% completion percentage, less passing yards, less average yards per attempt than Avery Johnson, I thought Rocco Becht made the plays when he needed to, and there was just some plays too many plays that Avery Johnson left on the table. And
Completely agree.
it might be unfair of me to say that, but at the same time, it felt like there were opportunities for Kansas State that they just weren't buttoned up on, and some of that falls on Avery Johnson.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought Avery Johnson, him and Rocco Becht had the exact opposite game. I thought Avery Johnson did the first and second downs really well, did the 3rd and 2s really well. The 4th and 1s, the 4th and 9s, we're in the red zone, we need something to happen here. I thought Avery Johnson did not play great football in those moments. Rocco Becht on the 1st and 10s, sailed a slant a little bit. Maybe threw behind a wide receiver, made him have to try and make a tough catch on a 2nd and 5. But on 4th and 1, Rocco Becht made a play. They got one-on-one man coverage to his guy on the corner, and he threw a beautiful fade into the corner of the end zone for a touchdown. They had the complete opposite games. I mean, we've talked about this, and when you're playing somebody when you're a good football, this is at any level of football. 2 good football teams, similar skill level, are playing each other. At the end of the day, whoever gains more yards doesn't really tend to mean a whole lot. Whoever, converted this many 3rd downs doesn't always seem to matter too much by the end of the game. It's always in those 5 to 10 critical high leverage situations, who wins the majority of those. And Iowa State won almost all of them. And then this kind of goes back to another conversation we were having off camera that I'll bring in here. There was a clip of Nick Saban talking about like the first coaching lesson he learned. And he said, it's the 4th downs, the critical play calls. It's not about the scheme or the play call. It's about getting the ball into your playmaker's hands. Now, he didn't say this, but this is a given, I think. You have to at least have somewhat of a decent schemed up play. You can't just like throw a wide receiver screen on 4th and 30 and be like, oh, dude, we need to make the play. Like, you have to have something there. But I noticed Iowa State every single time they had one of those 4th downs, who had the football? Rocco Becht. It was a creative play call that got Rocco Becht the football, and it was him, you go make a play. You're my guy, go make a play. Kansas State, first 4th and 1 in the game that they had, there was 3rd and 1, sorry. Joe Jackson, the backup running back, gets a carry up the middle, doesn't get it. 4th and 1, same exact play call, same player, didn't get it. I think you have to get the ball in Avery Johnson's hands on one of those 2 plays, or to Garrett Oakley, or to Chase Brown. I'm sure Dylan Edwards would have been in the scheme. Unfortunately, he got hurt. I hope he's okay. I looked at it before the show a couple hours ago. I don't know if I haven't heard anything about his long-term outlook yet, but your backup running back can't be touching the football on 3rd and 1, 4th and 1. And then the 4th and 9 that they went for.
Yeah.
Go for it.
No. You finish your point.
I was going to say, and then like the 4th and 9 that they went for, I don't know about. They were just over midfield. I think in a game where it's raining, it's pouring, it's kind of hard to throw downfield. I think you got to punt that and put Iowa State in territory. You give up a lot of momentum going for that and the football at midfield. And then I'm sure this will be a whole talking point, so we won't get into it now. But the obvious late game 4th down on your own 30, that's a different conversation. Yeah, Rocco Becht made the plays when he needed to, and Avery Johnson / Chris Kleiman did not.
Now that one in your own 30, ironically, Avery Johnson had the ball in his hand. He was just stuffed.
It's just not a good scenario to put him in.
I think it's an unfair thing for me to say because it was only a 3-point game, and like it's not like Avery Johnson lost the game. But there's this conversation that's going to happen everywhere around traditional media about Avery Johnson, because going into last year, he was everybody's top 5 Heisman pick. And Will Howard transferred out because Avery Johnson was ready. Avery Johnson's a kid from Kansas. He's got beautiful hair. He's electric on the ground. He got some really crazy comparisons his freshman year when he was just filling in for Will Howard or taking a couple plays here and there. Everyone expected him to be special. I don't want to shit on the kid because he's still an extremely talented football player. I think it's just time to start coming back on that idea. I came away with that game unimpressed. I felt like Avery Johnson has the ability and the talent to make big plays, but sometimes you just need your quarterback to be boring. Sometimes you just need your quarterback to complete the 5 yard out. Sometimes you just need your quarterback to roll out and hit the tight end on a dime. And I felt like the boring plays Avery Johnson wasn't making consistently, or if he was, it was a little off where the tight end needed to catch it to be able to run for more, or a little bit like it wasn't exactly where he needed to be. So, like I said, it might be unfair of me to say this because I don't think he lost them the game necessarily 24-21, but I don't think he won them the game either. And I'm not. I think Dylan Edwards is an excellent running back. I don't think he's worth 3 points, so I don't think they would have won the game with Dylan Edwards. I maybe you disagree
No,
with that.
no, I think I agree with that. I feel like Dylan Edwards isn't enough. I'm looking at the box score for Avery Johnson, just the receivers who got the ball. I noticed similar to you. So Garrett Oakley is probably one of their better players, the tight end. He was cooking early in the game. I mean, he's hard to tackle anyways. When it's raining, he is very hard to tackle. And they got him the ball early, and he had 3 receptions early in the game, and then he only ended up with 2 more after that. And the amount of times, like when you were talking about Avery Johnson not throwing underneath, there's so many clips where Garrett Oakley is 3-4 yards down the field, settled in a zone, wide open. Catch, turn, get a couple yards. It's easy 5+ yard pickup if he can make a man miss or break a tackle. And he just wouldn't do it. He'd either try to run and run too long to now where nobody's open, he has to throw it away, or try to make a play, or he would try to force something downfield. Jace Brown's a great player, but I don't know if I want to be forcing the ball 30 yards down the field into a tight window in pouring rain week 0 when I have a tight end wide open right in front of me. So I think that was a huge point. And to your point, like great quarterbacks make those reads and they make those plays. We've seen it firsthand. You look at guys that play on Sundays. Any good quarterback you've ever watched in college football or the NFL, they have that ability to know when to make a play, know when to take a play, and know when to like take a sack, that kind of stuff. It felt like Avery Johnson was trying to play hero ball way too much, and I think that hurt them a lot. I'm with you. I don't think that cost them the game. I think there's a lot of other things you could point to, but it definitely – I think they definitely could have won that game had they maybe played it a little bit smarter in that regard.
It's also the fact of going to your point, when you see Patrick Mahomes with the Chiefs, last year they were I think the least explosive offense in the country. And my camera's going blurry for a second, but they were the least explosive offense in the country in the NFL last year. But they made the Super Bowl. It's not
Yeah.
a matter of take every big play or to make those massive plays. It's also can you make this potential 3rd down play an easier 4th down conversion instead of go for all 9 yards? Can you like sometimes your job as a quarterback is, hey, it's 2nd and 7. Instead of taking the 50-50 ball that might get me the 1st down, why don't I take the 100% or 90% ball that'll get me to 3rd and 2, And there was just some, maybe a little, you would call them boring. Maybe that's the wrong word for it. I'm not sure. In my opinion, I think as a non-ball knower, I watched that game and I came away with Avery Johnson didn't make the plays. Rocco Becht did. While now I'm looking at the box score and it looks like the reverse. I still think Rocco Becht made the plays compared to Avery Johnson.
Yeah, that's a good anecdote of box score warriors. People that love to not watch a game and then get all into the box score and give you real opinions as if they did. This is a perfect game where somebody's trying to say Rocco Becht didn't play well, Avery Johnson did, or Avery Johnson outplayed Rocco Becht. I would very, very much argue they did not watch that football game. I also kind of looking forward now for Kansas State and Iowa State. They both have a pretty favorable schedule for the next month. Iowa State, they do play Iowa, the Cyhawk game, but that's not a conference game. So obviously, rival, grand scheme of things, trying to make a playoff, big game. But other than that, Iowa State, pretty favorable schedule coming up. They got South Dakota next week, a little break before Iowa. I like where they're at. That was a team. I'll give us some credit here. When we did our Big 12 recap show, Iowa State was the team that was like kind of way down the list that we said, hey, if you want to bet in some value, I think Iowa State's the team to do it. Favorable schedule. And are we underrating Matt Campbell, Rocco Becht, and having your core back? They're going to be first place in the Big 12 until October, because that's the next time they play in the Big 12. So they're going to have that spot locked in for a month, and they're going to sit up there for a while. And they have one of the easier Big 12 schedules when you look at the grand scheme of things. They get some easier games at home. They don't have to go play. Like Kansas State is a tough one. I think they play at Texas Tech late in the year, followed by a Baylor game. Iowa State kind of dodges that, which is nice. So that's great. If you place that bet, great value. Who's their first Big 12 game? Or not first, but next after this one?
Kansas State. Kansas State plays Arizona on September 12th.
Okay. And then is UCF the game Friday after?
Game. Okay. UCF is the game after, but they have a bye in between. So they play UCF September 27th.
That's good. So if you're Kansas State, season's not lost. You can recover from that. It does really actually stink for Kansas State. That does count as like one of your home conference games. Also because they mentioned it, they had like fly out the PA announcer, and they had to like fly out the equipment for everything as if they were doing the productions. That kind of is unfortunate on their part. But you can bounce back. You got North Dakota, Army, then you were saying Arizona and UCF. That's 4 very winnable games. Get yourself back to 4-0. You will still be in the rankings at that point. Get Avery Johnson back. Fingers crossed Dylan Edwards gets healthy in that stretch and is back. But if you're Kansas State, your season's not over. I think it might feel like it with how much energy was going into that game and how much it felt like they wanted that win. Yeah. Season's not lost for Kansas State. But I think on a brighter note, I really like what this means for Iowa State and where they sit now in the Big 12. You got the easier schedule. You capitalize. This was definitely not a must-win game, but it was really good. We put ourselves in a really good spot if we win this game. They did. Now they think they can have some fun, play South Dakota, play Iowa back in Iowa, but in Ames. That game's at Iowa State. So I like the outlook for Iowa State. I'm curious do you think Iowa State will finish above Kansas State in the Big 12 grand scheme of things at the end of the year, or do you think this is going to get flipped before the end of the season?
I'm looking at their schedule. It's not like Iowa State has that much of an easier schedule. They still got ASU at home. They have TCU on the road. They have Kansas, who won their game against Fresno State. They looked impressive against Fresno State yesterday. They have Cincy on the road. We don't know what Colorado is going to be yet, so they have Colorado on the road. Iowa State's got some tough matchups coming up, but Kansas State also, likewise, at Baylor versus TCU, home against TCU, at Kansas, home against Texas Tech, at Colorado, at Utah, and then home against Colorado. They both have a good amount of games coming up. I think by just natural common sense, you have to assume Iowa State's going to be above Kansas State for the foreseeable future, at least, because they won their head-to-head. They had an opportunity to play for like league hierarchy, and one of them won, and one of them's above the other. So just based off of just common sense, you could probably assume that Kansas State's going to be below Iowa State for the season. But that's, like you said, the season's not lost for Kansas State. The season's not won for Iowa State. You can tell me all that you want about field conditions. You can tell me all that you want about the travel, and I promise you will believe 90% of that. At the same time, Rocco Becht, what did we say about him going into the year? We want his completion percentage to be better. We want him to be a little bit more consistent, because then he'll be a true dog. And instead of the guy that shows flashes, he's completed 50% of his passes through for under 200 yards. Now, it was a hard game to even hold the football, so I'll give you that. Just because they won this game by 3 doesn't mean that they've won the conference already. We don't know what Colorado is going to be. We don't know what Utah is going to be yet. We haven't seen those teams play. We don't know TCU, your pick. There's so many teams out there that they could have a say in this. And just because Iowa State won the first one, everyone not crowning them, but it was, you could also argue that game was pretty sloppy in a low level execution college football game. And maybe if a Utah or Colorado, or pick your favorite Big 12 team there, was in that game, it would either look the same or they would destroy Iowa State. Who knows, you know?
Yeah, yeah, it'll be interesting to see like some of those question mark teams how they pan out. But I love Iowa State's situation right now. You win that, you sit atop the conference. You get Arizona next. I don't think Arizona is going to be much this year. I don't think Cincinnati is going to be any good. I think that you can start off 3-0 after those two games, heading into mid-October, 3-0 in your conference. At Colorado could give room for pause. I'm not very in on Colorado this year. I think they're going to struggle pretty mightily. I think you have a very realistic chance to be 4-0 heading into a bye week. And then come out of the bye week, you get BYU at home. With BYU's current quarterback situation, starting a true freshman, I think they probably take a step back this year. That gives you a chance to get to 5-0 in the conference. And if that's the case, if they're 5-0 going to the conference, that means they are going to probably be a top 15, if not better team by that point. And they would play Arizona State November 1st. That would be a fantastic game. That one's in Ames as well. You have a very realistic chance. Like the hardest team you're going to have to play, you get at home. That's a big benefit. Unfortunately, I think the one fear I would have is Arizona State would be the best team they play probably since yesterday. So you just sometimes it can be tough. Not that this is like a bad excuse or anything. Like it can be, when you play cupcakes, or I shouldn't call them cupcakes. When you play opponents here and then you got to play an opponent here, and there's not really much of a gradual growth to that, it can be hard to sometimes compete at that top level. So we'll see how that goes for them. But until that game, I love where they're. Until November 1, I think they're probably going to be favored in all of these games, other than the Iowa game. But we'll talk Big 12 games. And then you do finish the season a little tough. The Arizona State at TCU will be tough. Kansas, you do get them at home, but I think Kansas is a solid program. And then you finish the year at Oklahoma State. Knock on wood, that should be a win for them as well. So I like the position there in a lot moving forward. If I was an Iowa State fan, that you don't want to overreact to a win, but I think that's a very warranted, like, big reaction, because I think that's a great way to start your season looking at the position you're now in.
I'm going to ask you something that's pretty unserious, but I was thinking about it during the game, especially during the first half that was sloppy. So when the MLB plays overseas, a lot of times it's like the best of the best playing. It's like an all-star game, or they'll send the Dodgers, to play overseas.
Yeah, like Dodgers, Padres.
Right. When the NFL plays overseas, most of the time it's the Jaguars for some reason. So two completely different approaches there. But I was thinking during the first half, and I was like, is this a really good representation of what college football is, to, like, if we're trying to grow an audience in Ireland? Or is this the worst representation because it's just sloppy? Like, would we rather have 1,000,000 points, or would we rather just show them this is what college football is? And it's within the first 5 minutes of the game, there's going to be 2 fumbles that they probably should have both scored on. But it's a completely unserious question. But I guess my thing is, like, was that a game that you would want to send out for the masses in another country to see as the representative of your sport?
I feel like it maybe would have been fun if you were Irish and didn't know much about American football. The fumbles, I think, would have been exciting. Some of the big plays would have been exciting. If I was in charge of the college football scheduling and where we put games, I would have probably gone with a little bit more of like a higher talent. I probably would have gone Notre Dame for the vibes. I think being the Irish, I think kind of probably part of that. Like Notre Dame, Miami probably would have been maybe upgrade the quality of play a little bit more.
Yeah.
Also, I do think the quality of play would have been better if it weren't for it was pouring rain. The field looks disgustingly wet, and it was pouring, and like nobody could haul. And I know these are 2 good teams. We've seen them be good last year, the year before. We know they have good players. So I think it was a fine game to pick. Actually, I love that it was like 2 farm schools. Farmageddon was great. I feel like people in Ireland kind of would. I don't know. This could be so off base of I have no I have no like cultural knowledge of what people in Ireland are like and what they do and what they would prefer in a American football game. I think the conditions probably screwed them, but if it were my choice, I probably would have done that Notre Dame Miami game. Just I think would have been kind of fun to have the Irish out there.
And then the second thing I wrote down here, I have three things I wrote down. So that was the first thing. The second thing I wrote down here, I don't know if you saw on Twitter. So I obviously didn't go to the game and I wasn't in Dublin this weekend to confirm this firsthand. But I saw this on Twitter. There were someone who went around. He saw multiple pubs with two flags. One of them was an Iowa State flag, and the other one was a state of Kansas flag. And the guy was like, the guy on Twitter said, I've seen multiple pubs like this, and which kind of confirms that a bunch of pub owners in Ireland looked up this phrase Kansas State flag and ordered that instead of Kansas State football flag, So a bunch of pubs just had the state of Kansas flag with Iowa State on there instead of the Kansas State Wildcats flag.
I hope they leave it up. I feel like that would just be a fun. Now, I'm sure they know now that it's wrong. There's definitely, Americans, we can be jackasses. I'm sure they were like, oh, your flags are on outside. I hope they kind of leave it up. I feel like that would be a fun touch. If you were like if you're an American, don't care about football from Kansas, and you're walking around Ireland, like, why is there a Kansas flag up there? I say leave them. My fiance brought up, we were talking about that in our car ride to the wedding. And she also, I didn't see this, but she was mentioning she saw on Twitter similar scenario, but it was with like tip jars. Which, like, if for those of you, tipping isn't a big thing in Europe. It's not really something you do. But I think these bars were like, oh, there's gonna be a bunch of Americans. Let's get some money off of them for drinking. But a lot of them just did like the Iowa Hawkeye logo for Iowa State, and then it was like the actual Kansas State logo. So nobody was putting money, and like Iowa State hates Iowa. It's a big rivalry. So no one was putting money in the Iowa ones. It was an empty jar, and then people didn't want to put it in the Kansas State one because it's like, I'm not going to put money in my rival's jar, or not rival, but team I'm playing against.
My opponent.
So it didn't work very well. I don't think they made much money doing that. So either they're probably like, man, these Americans, they're greedier than I thought, or they're probably like, man, they're smart. Like they were onto us, not realizing you just offended half the people.
Hey, I appreciate the Dublin faithful for trying to bring in the right, trying to make the experience even better for the people that were coming to your country.
Yeah, because we do that. Like game day, like if you go to Madison, Wisconsin for a game, they'll have those up, and you're going to throw money in. Bowl game, I feel like every playoffs you always see that. It's smart. Poor execution. It was kind of like that football game we watched.
The game itself, absolutely. Could you imagine how fun it would be if you were a Kansas State fan? You had the week off work, and you were like, I'm going to this game. First of all, you start drinking there. That's all I've been told about that experience is you land, and all of a sudden you have a beer in your hand. And then you go to the game, your team wins the game against a conference rival. You're not only 1-0, but you're 1-0 in your conference now. How fun was last night for Kansas State fans in Ireland?
Or you mean Iowa State?
Iowa State fans.
Iowa State, yeah. Oh, I wonder how many Guinnesses were drinking, not only in Dublin of Iowa State fans, of Iowa State fans that live in Iowa don't strike me as people who would drink Guinness normally. From my fiance's family living out there, I don't think that's a beer that people really drink. Her cousin, we've talked a little bit about him. He sent me a picture. He was drinking Guinness yesterday. Like had his first one.
Hell yeah.
One of his first ones. And I actually asked him how it was. But you had to celebrate right. And I wonder how many, like if you could see a chart of Guinness sales in Iowa for the course of like 10 years, that had to be the biggest spike. I guarantee it. I should, if any of you work for like those analytic companies for like, company like analytics, data analytics for like food and beverage companies, or you work for Guinness, reach out to us. I would love to see Guinness sales in Iowa that day.
Yeah, we're taking a lot away from this game. The last thing I want to take away from this game is just the unbelievable bad beat that you and I had on the first game. I think Jason and I took the over 49.5 on points. touchdown. The kid's name is escaping my mind, but he stretched across the goal line. It was the first touchdown. I texted Jace. He was in the wedding ceremony, so he couldn't respond. But I texted him, "Oh my God, our over hit," because we had kind of resided to the fact that it wasn't going to in the first half because it was 7-7, and then that score would have made it 31-24. I was like, "Oh my God, we did it!" And then they called it back, and Matt Campbell just spat in our face and kneeled it out 3 times from the 1 yard line.
Sports betting, as fun as it can be, is also just the most like frustrating. Watching something like that, obviously you made the right call. They won the football game, close it out. It's raining, but as a fan, score, run the ball.
It's just, I was just praying that they would just like hand the ball off, try to score. But I think after seeing 2 fumbles that game, he was 4 fumbles combined. He was like, "I'm just going to kneel it out and win."
Yep, it worked. Whatever, Matt. Take your win.
All right. So that's our first game recap. Not every game recap going forward is going to be 51 minutes, but that one I think deserved it for our first game recap and a game in Ireland. Quickly just talk about a lot of people have talked about this already because I think the news came out Tuesday or Wednesday of last week, but we weren't on, so we have to respond to it right now. The SEC came out with a statement. They are going to implement a 9-game conference schedule in 2026. What everybody's been asking for. The SEC will continue with the single standings. They're not going to go divisional. Each school will play 3 annual opponents, focused on maintaining traditional rivalries. So, for example, Alabama has to play Auburn. Texas has to play Oklahoma. Florida has to play Florida State. Clemson has to play. South Carolina has to play Clemson. So some of those are out of state. Some of those are in state. Each school will also face every SEC program at least once every 2 years, and every opponent home and away in 4 years. And this is to me the most interesting part. SEC teams are required to schedule at least one additional high quality non-conference game from the ACC, Big Ten, or Big 12 conferences, or Notre Dame each season. So that's basically, on one hand, the SEC responding to the college football committee playoff committee saying, we're going to take into account your conference strength of schedule a lot more compared when we're trying to decide our playoff player teams, whatever. The other side of it is, I think we talked about it last week when the news came out that the Big Ten wanted to propose a 24-28 team playoff, and you and I said, this doesn't sound real. You and I said that this sounds like negotiating. And it was pretty bad negotiating by the Big Ten, because if the Big Ten, unless they were in cahoots and there was some bigger plan that we don't know about yet, Greg Sankey and the SEC commissioner has said for a long time he wants to go to 9 conference games. He was just trying to get his school presidents to sign off on it. So the Big Ten was basically asking for something that the commissioner already wanted. So it was kind of poor negotiating there. But the Big Ten wanted the AQI model, the automatic qualifier. The Big 12, ACC, and SEC, most importantly, the SEC, want the at-large model, where we're going to go into the 16-team playoff. There's going to be conference champs. Everyone else by committee. So this is a way to get the Big Ten to sign off on the new playoff structure, because the SEC is going to 9 conference games. But I also think this is also the SEC trying to get with the times. Every time something's changed in college football, the SEC is adjusted first. And I think this is the SEC trying to get with the times, get their strength of schedule up higher.
Yeah, I thought this was a really good move by the SEC in a lot of regards. Big one, I always felt felt bad for South Carolina or for Florida. And South Carolina plays Clemson every year.
Right.
Most other SEC teams are just playing, they're kind of dogging the non-conference. They're just kind of trying to find the easiest 4 teams they can, throw them a little bit of money and just kill them. So I always felt like that's disadvantage to South Carolina. So now with this new, hey, you got to play at least one competitive one, like that South Carolina-Clemson game will count as one of their 3 traditional rivalries they're going to maintain, and that'll cover them for their out of conference. Okay, you got to play a quality opponent, so you don't have to worry about if you're a South Carolina fan. you do not have to schedule Oregon and Clemson now. Like you're good with just the Clemson game. So I think that was a big win to kind of even out some with even just within the SEC, even out what some of those teams had to deal with. I also think this is a good move for them in the at-large in the argument. Like I love the Big Ten. The two schools that I mainly root for are in the Big Ten, but I'm not a fan of like the automatic qualifier situation the Big Ten was trying to do. I'm more of an at-large person. I feel like this was a move towards the at-large scenario. And hey, if this is the compromise them and the Big Ten had to make to get both what they wanted, it's a win-win for fans. I think we got the at-large. We're probably going to get the at-large situation. I think that's probably the fan consensus of what we would want. I guess unless you're a fan of a smaller school, then I'm sorry that could be tough for you. And then also the 9 conference games. I think that's nice too. No more Week 12 Mercer. I think I will die on this hill. I think people really underestimated the benefit of getting a game off Week 12 of a college football season is.
Is it better than a
Michigan?
game?
Yeah, for sure. Because you still get the preparation, you still get the warm up, you still get the game, you still get the experience. But you don't have to do it with your starters. You can get all of your backups, real game experience, middle of the season preparation experience. The coaching staff doesn't have to worry about like changing their structure. It's just different players this time. It's such a benefit. Your starters get healthy. They get to take a little bit of a rest. Your bench and backup players get game experience. They get a little bit. You never know when you're going to need somebody to step up and play. It was such an advantage to have that for the SEC, and I think now that that's gone, it becomes a lot more fair. I also just personally like mentally enjoy the organization now of like teams all of the non-conference games happening like probably within the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season, and then not having to, because I hate when you're like looking at the slate for a day and it's like, oh man, why is like 10 SEC teams playing FCS, but then Georgia and Alabama play today, and I just didn't really like that. So I mean that's a total like personal thing of me, but I enjoyed it, and I do think like obviously when this came out, it was nice for all the reasons we've talked about, but maybe even the bigger step would be, okay, what does this mean now for the next iteration of the college football playoff? I think you kind of alluded to it. I do think this means the at-large bid is probably going to be what we're looking at. And then, yep. And an interesting note, if you remember the wordage, the verbiage the College Football Playoff Committee used recently when talking about how they're going to evaluate teams to pick, they just kind of threw out the arbitrary enhanced metrics in specifics to like strength of schedule and strength of record, I think was the other one, and getting into enhanced metrics. Does this give the SC I don't know what the enhanced metrics means. They didn't talk about what that is, what the calculations are. I have to imagine whatever that is, if you're thinking logically about what they would do, this has got to be a great move for the SEC in that regard, right?
I would assume so because main point is it now forces the Big Ten to respond. And the Big Ten, from what I know, I don't think has this rule. But if you remember a couple of weeks ago, Curt Cignetti canceled the Virginia game that they have in non-con coming up. First of all, Virginia would be a perfect team for them to play. You're probably going to beat them, and then you're also that signs you off on that requirement if the Big Ten were to add that. So they were pretty short-sighted in adding that game. And I was listening to a different podcast yesterday, and they basically said Indiana has to start getting prepared to paying a lot of buyouts for some of the non-con games they've already signed off for, because they aren't going to have any strength of schedule, especially if they have years where their conference schedule looks like it did last year. And then teams like Penn State, who regularly schedule softly in the non-con, they have Nevada this year, they have FIU, I think, and then they have Villanova. Not in basketball, in football, they have Villanova. So Penn State's going to have to make an adjustment, try to schedule differently in the non-con. And also that doesn't mean that you're going to have to schedule 3 hard games or 3 power conference games, but that just means one of your games has to. And you can argue this about everybody. Like Ohio State is playing Texas this year. They would be good. But that's also a team that is not scared of any major game. They're going to play that game. Oregon, You could say that they have no hard games, but I would argue 2 years ago they started the season with Georgia, and before the Big Ten move, they had Michigan State on for home and home. They were playing Oklahoma State this year, so they obviously had to cancel the Michigan State home and home series because they're joining Michigan State's conference. There's every team's going to have to start getting in line. The Big Ten is a great conference, but some of their scheduling is going to have to start changing too, and it depends on. Now it makes me wonder, what does this mean for a Ohio State, an Oregon, a Penn State, who's, let's be honest, a Michigan, whose strength of schedule most years is actually fairly light because they don't have the misfortune of playing each other and playing themselves. So like Ohio State's strength of schedule always has been pretty light because they never have to play themselves. They played a good Michigan team. Michigan never has to play themselves. They play Penn State, Ohio State. So there's 2 games that are really good. That's going to be interesting to see how they're going to start changing up their scheduling rules. I'm sure Tony Petitti and his staff, if they haven't already looked at it, they're going to start looking at it. I think what you said is right, though. We're going to be going to the at-large model of the 16-team college football playoff starting probably next year, and we'll see how it goes from there. I'm sure there's going to be more changes. I'm sure that's not it from there,
Yeah. If I'm the Big Ten right now, I think you have to think a little objectively and realize this sets the SEC way ahead of you strength in terms of enhanced metrics, whatever that looks like. Like whatever conference you want to argue is better for whatever reason you want to give, that's fine. Undeniably, the SEC will produce a much more difficult strength of schedule, a much more impressive strength of schedule when you do 9 and 9, right? And then the caveat of having to do one high quality non-conference game even adds to that. And if you're the Big Ten, I would argue you might have to go with 2 high quality non-con games to make up for what the SEC is going to get in the conference. And it's tough. It's tough because you can't also schedule, like if you are like, oh man, we really need to up our strength of schedule. Okay, let's schedule Alabama. Well, then you just gave Alabama, also an extra leg up on you because then they get you. So you're going to have to play top ACC, top Big 12. No, I imagine this is going to be a big effort for the Big Ten trying to play a lot of Notre Dame. I don't know if Notre Dame's going to even want to play many Big Ten teams because I think they've got a perfect setup if you're Notre Dame right now. It's going to be interesting to see what the Big Ten does. They're going to have to respond. I think this really did set the SEC above, and I could see a world where Big Ten maybe doesn't respond immediately. Fair, you don't want to rush into make a bad decision, but I could definitely see a world where the SEC gets like 9 of the 16, at-large bids into a playoff because of how impressive their strength of record and schedule is going to be. Whether they deserve that or not is a different conversation, but I could see a world where that happens, and the Big Ten's like, all right, we really do need to change something because we can't let this happen every year. There's going to be a lot of changes. I'm sure a lot will change between now and then where it's an entirely different conversation by the time we see a 16-team at-large playoff, but there's the kind of things I'm thinking about when this came out.
We're like 10 years out from maybe 20, but from this becoming a rule of you have to schedule 2, you have to schedule 3, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is the Super League. This is the Big 10, Big 12, SEC only playing each other, cutting out the lower level Division I program. ACC also in there, cutting out the lower level Division I programs. We're only going to play each other, and it's eventually going to lead into that possibly. It's a concept of I think to put a bow on it for myself, and obviously if you have anything else to say, feel free. It's a reminder to everyone at home who has to remind themselves of this, that perfect isn't happening anymore regularly in college football. 9-3, 8-4 is your new 10-2. 10-2 is your new is the old 11-1, 12-0. 11-1 is the old 12-0. Perfect is not going to happen as often. I don't know if I even explained that right, but my point is the committee's not going to determine everything only off record anymore. And a lot of that is because they understand how hard the SEC week-by-week schedule is how hard some of the Big Ten week-by-week schedules are. And not only is it because the conference is so massive, but also you're playing real teams every week. So now with the strength of schedule requirement being something that the committee wants to take into consideration more, the SEC is going to have a bigger leg up. The Big Ten is going to have a bigger leg up as they start scheduling these bigger teams. So if you were a regular 8-4 team, you have to kind of reconfigure your mind of maybe my team's going to struggle to go 6-6, or they're going to go 7-5 in our good years. Or if your team was regularly 10-2, you're going to have to start getting used to some 8-4 years. But that doesn't mean you're not going to make the playoff if your schedule was good. Like this year's Oklahoma team, this year's Florida team, if they go 9-3, they have an argument for the playoff. They absolutely have an argument for the playoff. But like last year's, I don't know, pick Indiana's the obvious one, but pick any team with a light strength.
Ole Miss was up there.
You go 11-1. You might not get into the playoff over a team like Florida, who would go 9-3 maybe with that schedule. So that's my bow on this take. This was something that we've been waiting on from the SEC for a while. They've said they wanted to do this. It's happened now. That's kind of how I see it.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's a good bow. Let's end this episode 20 with a little bit of recap. So Farbode and I, we gave 4 picks coming into this weekend. We actually gave 5. The 5th one is the Boise State South Florida game, which will be on Thursday. We'll talk a little bit more about that on our next episode. But 4 of our 5 picks have finished. Farbode and I both went 3-1. A little bit different routes to get there. Our first game was Iowa State, Kansas State -3. Farbode, you were on the Wildcats. I was on the Cyclones. That was one of those games that felt like it could have gone. It was back and forth. Felt like it could have gone either way.
I technically went 0-2 on that game because of the over. But that was a collective pick.
That was a team effort. One that we both hit: Fresno State at Kansas. I didn't get a chance to watch this game, so I don't have any game breakdown other than like clips I've seen on social media. We both were on Kansas, 31-7 final score. I don't know if you watched it at all. If you did, I would love to hear some of your thoughts about the actual gameplay. But going into that game, our thought process was Lance Leipold, Jalen Daniels. Kansas has continuity and a coaching staff that's been there that we like. Nothing wrong at all with Matt Entz in Fresno State. We think he's got a bright future there. He's a Chris Klieman disciple from North Dakota State. Won 2 national championships there. But he's coming in with an entirely new roster, new coaching staff. We both just kind of were like, the continuity aspect of it. I can't say for certain that was why they won 31-7. Maybe I'll lean on you if you saw any of that game.
So when the game started, I watched most of the game. By the way, EJ Warner, Kurt Warner's son, quarterback of Fresno State. Cool.
Is he good? Did he look good?
He threw 2 picks. He looked fine to me. I think there's a lot of people online who are freaking out more than they need to. But it was one of those games where it started out, Kansas went down, scored right away, 7. And then Fresno State did the same thing. And I was like, oh my gosh, Matt Entz is going to put up like a brilliant game. And it's going to be one of those games that Kansas loses that they shouldn't have lost, even though they've taken the next step of their program. In their program, still they haven't taken the can't get upset by teams you shouldn't be upset by step yet. I thought Jalen Daniels looked good. I thought he averaged 8.8 yards per throw. The run game was good. EJ Warner, after it felt like one of those games where after the first drive that was mostly scripted plays by Fresno State and they scored a touchdown on, they stalled out from there. He threw 2 picks. He didn't have a touchdown. Kansas, you're a little worried. They went 2 of 10 on 3rd down. They went 2 for 3 on 4th. But total yards, passing, they were about pretty equal. Rushing, Kansas had a 207-37 rushing yard advantage. They had a lot more penalties. They had the ball for a lot more, and Fresno State had 3 turnovers. Like I said, it's not that you expected this to be a beatdown, but the the odds were also 12.5 on Kansas for a reason. Matt Entz, like you said, is going to be a great coach, but this is year one in a rebuild for him. Jalen Daniels, I'm pretty high on him. Like I said,
Your alma mater too.
My diploma's somewhere in here. I promise you that.
Sure.
Yeah, see? My diploma's in there.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So, should get that framed.
We will. I have my other diplomas that are up this high.
There you go. Our Oregon ones are pretty cool, not going to lie.
Yeah. No,
Oregon did a good job with theirs.
We're kind of waiting to get the right frame to match. I have my undergrad diplomas up here. But like I said, Jalen Daniels did well. Lance Leipold's a great coach. By the way, they renovated half of the stadium, and that half looks absolutely beautiful. Like, if you haven't seen it, I would look it up after the show.
All right. Yeah.
So that all looks good. The Idaho State UNLV game that I got right, I thought that was that. Look, I didn't provide any analysis. I remember when I made that pick, I just said I have a principled feeling of anything over 25 points in a spread, you better make it happen, or else I'm going to be very upset that I picked you. So I picked Idaho State. UNLV kind of struggled against Idaho State. Dan Mullins.
We had an orgy in the end zone. I saw that on Twitter.
Hey,
can I say that? Is that allowed?
Yeah, of course. I think if you're a broadcaster, you got to say that once if you're calling an Alex orgy game.
Yeah, that's the only time in your life you're going to be able to say something like that on TV and not get in trouble for it. I did see that. I saw that clip though. It was like to go up like 38-31. I was like, well, there goes my similar thing. That was during the wedding. I wasn't watching it. So when I saw that clip on Twitter, like later when we were leaving, I was like, oh yeah, I got that one wrong. Unless they scored another 20 points post the final minute and a half, which I don't think was going to happen.
I didn't want to text
you. You followed good betting advice there. Your betting advice was smart there. With there's no reason, and I should have followed it. No reason to take 25.5 points for almost anybody, let alone UNLV. Penn State, sure, they return everybody and they're a wagon. UNLV, was smart on your part, not on mine. That was a good call.
And then after that, we both took Hawaii against Stanford. And Hawaii kicked the last second field goal to walk it off and win 23-20. So we covered. We finished the week both 3-1. Did you have anything on the Stanford Hawaii game?
I did see the final couple drives of that game, but I wanted to talk about the final drive. Frank Reich, dude, what are you doing? When he was not calling his timeouts just to let. So Hawaii, I saw, this is not my research. This is stolen research here. Hawaii had already made 2 field goals from basically that exact same spot on the field, hash and yard line, on the same side of the stadium. So the kicker had already 2 for 2 from that exact same scenario. What makes you think he's going to randomly miss this third one on nice weather and he's a good kicker? You don't want a chance, dude. You don't want a single chance.
Right.
I'm not saying that, oh man, you wasted a minute and a half. It was 25 seconds you maybe could have saved. But still, that 25 seconds in college football, when the clock stops after first downs, you get out of bounds. You're Stanford. I would hope that you might have a good enough kick returner that Hawaii might not, that could maybe do something against Hawaii. Maybe you throw a screen, you do a Ben Johnson little, throw a hitch route and then have your running back run behind it for a pitch. There's something you could have done. There has to be. I thought that was a disaster by Frank Reich. Crazy that he's an NFL coach and he did that. That was Matt Eberflus level. That's one of those, when you're watching the end of the first half, when we were talking about Kansas State didn't call the timeouts and just kind of let the clock go. 7-7, end of the first half. As a fan and somebody who plays college football 26, where I'm always just trying to score, I was like, call a timeout, get a little aggressive. They didn't, whatever, that's fine. Dude, 20 seconds left in the game. You're losing. Yeah. Call your timeouts. What are you saving them for? There's no – what are you going to do? You might as well call them. I don't know what you were hoping to do.
Wait,
just such bad coaching.
Are you telling me the timeouts don't roll over to the next game?
Frank Reich.
Does that happen in the NFL?
He's such an idiot.
Look, you could. I guess coaches are allowed to get first game jitters too, but I hate to be the bearer of bad news. Stanford might go 0-12 this year. And like that was they had a mass exodus. They fired their coach. Andrew Luck took over. He hired Frank Reich just for the year. It's going to be a hard year for them. But you got to
Yeah,
try to
Frank
win
Reich's
games
not
when
getting
you
another
can.
job after this too. Yeah, he's going jobless, I think, once this is done.
What if he bounces around and somehow Stanford goes like 8-4 this year with Frank Reich? I'm not saying that'll happen.
No, here's the Stanford schedule. Next up, they got at BYU. Tough. Boston College at home. That's probably a winnable game. Then you go at Virginia. Not that Virginia's any good, but on the road's tough, especially when you're flying from Bay Area. San Jose State, interesting one. They're actually not a bad program whatsoever, and I don't think Stanford's much better than San Jose State is. That'll be at least it's close. I guess it's a home game though, so you probably will have more San Jose State fans there than you will Stanford fans.
Possibly, yeah.
And then at SMU, Florida State, at Miami, Pitt, at North Carolina, Cal, Notre Dame. That is a very realistic chance at 2 or less wins.
Yeah. I mean, their win
Now
total
I'm curious what
is
their
2.5.
And I based on the schedule, I'm going to go the under, man. There's my late take of the under.
I mean, I think if you are a Stanford administrator, how did this podcast turn to Stanford? We're an hour and 17 in, so we're just going everywhere now. But if you're a Stanford administrator or athletic director, if you hold this season against Frank Reich, who came in March, or Andrew Luck, who's just trying to fix this, I really hope you don't, because the program is just in a dark place right now, and they're trying to dig it out. And Frank Reich's kind of just a holdover, someone that Andrew Luck can trust for now. And unfortunately,
Andrew Luck's like, I can't trust this guy anymore.
I mean, there might be a chance, and maybe this is better for me to say off camera, I mean, off the recording, but there might be a chance that Andrew Luck hired him because he trusts him and he just wants to weed out bad people in the program rather than actual wins. Like he wants him to tell him, I don't know if there are bad people or not, but maybe because that's a guy he can trust and a guy who's going to be in the building every day. He's like, I need you to give me a sense on everything, and wins and losses don't matter.
That's a good point. It could be a USC situation. You have no idea. I guess time will tell, right? I feel like that stuff will come out.
Yeah.
Like that's one of those things in 2 years from now when Stanford's back, well, I'm not predicting they're going to be back, but if they're back, that's something you hear about. You're like, oh shoot, kind of like with USC, with like now that it's kind of come out that they had some stuff going on within the program. It's been like, oh, okay, I didn't realize that. I just thought they were kind of falling apart, but it sounds like they're on better grounds. Could be the same case with Stanford. Who knows? It is sad to see a program like that really just, get to the pit of where they're at right now. When I was a kid, that was like, as an Oregon fan growing up, Stanford was my Achilles heel, man. That was the BCS era. You had to go 12-0. Yeah, shoot, unfortunately.
I'll tell you right now, if Stanford was playing Oregon this year, I would take the over on Stanford's win total because somehow Oregon would, even with how good they are, they would struggle against Stanford just because, for whatever reason, it was the Arizonas and Stanford that always had the random one-off wins against Oregon. That's a program that deserves to be good. I don't know how I like saying the word deserves, because you could say Nebraska deserves to be good and they were down for a while. Texas deserved to be good and they were down for a while. That's a program that cares. It's really hard to get into the school. The academic calendar doesn't really work transfer-wise. They're trying to make some changes, and it's all for the better. And they're at least trying to get with the times. It's just hard, especially when you're in the ACC and you play on the West Coast. On that note, Jace, that's our picks from this week. From this past week, we went 3-1. I already put them on a Google Doc. We're gonna start tracking our individual records and collective records on Wednesday or Thursday when episode 21 comes out. We're going to be picking a bunch of major games. So we're going to give ourselves a chance to change our picks on the Boise State South Florida game. Texas, Ohio State, Saturday on Fox. Alabama, Florida State, ABC Saturday. LSU, Clemson. Virginia Tech, South Carolina. Notre Dame, Miami. There's a bunch of big games happening in week 1. And we're going to give you all of our picks in our midweek show. If you missed it at the beginning of the show, we're going to start from here on out going two shows per week. And if that schedule works for us, we might do that in the off season too. But at least during the regular season, we're going to be doing it. We appreciate everybody who's tuned in. You can follow us on YouTube at Flag for Discussion. We're on TikTok at Flag4Discussion and on Twitter at F4Discussion. Got it right that time. We're also on all the podcast. Bang! We're also on all your podcast platforms: Apple Podcast, Spotify, every other one other than that too. There's a lot, those are the two I use. Thank you so much for tuning in. It felt really good to just recap football games and talk. We spent 50 minutes talking about one college football game. That shows how much of a sicko you and I are. But
Been waiting for this, dude.
Yeah, we've been looking forward to this show. Thanks everybody for tuning in. My name's Ferbo Mercati. He's Jace Hatfield. It's been Flag for Discussion, episode 20. Peace.